take the North and never give it back.
So that's a good pick. You get the corner. I gotta go bold, right? I gotta go bold for this.
Yeah, she's got some nice.
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron. Make sure to like and subscribe out there on YouTube. Also, hit the notification bell because we will be live tonight breaking down my 53-man roster prediction. So we'll have that episode out there for all the podcast listeners. Because if you haven't already, go on your phone, go to Apple Podcast or Spotify, however you get your podcast. Search for Unbearable Sports, download the podcast, and you can listen to it everywhere that you go. And shout out to all the people that have rated 5 stars. I'm seeing that number grow. I greatly appreciate it. It helps out the show absolutely tremendously. So thank you all for all the support. But today, let's just get right down to it. We're going to talk about what the moves Ryan Poles has already made. Like I said, tonight we'll break down the 53-man prediction, but I want to talk about who's been placed on IR, more about the people that the Bears signed, Darrell Taylor and Chris Williams at the defensive tackle spot, who they traded for, and then also the players that they have cut so far, because Ryan Poles is like, listen, I'm just going to start making roster moves right away, which, we'll talk about a little bit later on into the show. But let's get into the players that were placed on IR. So first off, Simba Webster, someone who has been on the Bears practice squad for quite some time, unfortunately went down with an injury at the Chiefs game. He's out for the season now, officially placed on IR. And also, one of our favorites, Ian Wheeler, unfortunately placed on IR, which is really unfortunate. I love the way that he was running, love the type of player he was. And I know that there was going to be a lot of talk on, could he actually be on this active roster over, let's say, a Travis Homer, or be the 4th running back and kind of not have Velus Jones be kind of that 4th string running back. So there was going to be a lot of talks on this, but ultimately Ian Wheeler, the undrafted rookie out of Howard, his season cut short and placed on IR, unfortunately. So I was hoping for it. It wasn't saying that he would definitely make the roster. I thought he was going to be more of a practice squad player, ultimately, when you started looking at this roster. But on IR, on to next season for him to then be a Chicago Bear. So those are the only 2 people placed on IR. Now, Douglas Coleman III, who went down with that scary neck injury, an update on that. He was able to leave the hospital, so better. It's obviously for a bad injury like that, that's good news to hear that he's actually able to leave the hospital, but ultimately was cut or waived with an injury designation on it. So not an official IR spot, but someone that has an injury designation that was waived. So let's talk about some of the Bears that they added, and then we'll get into the players that they cut. So first off, the first move that came down the pipeline was the Bears traded for defensive end Darrell Taylor, and they traded away a 2025 6th-round pick. So let me know, if you're watching out there on YouTube, how would you grade this trade? So the Bears essentially trading away a 6th-rounder. Like we know, a lot of these day 3 picks, the chances of them hitting, relatively low. But ultimately, 6th round over to the Seahawks. You have Waldron, who definitely knows Darrell Taylor with being the offensive coordinator over there at Seattle. But he's also going into a contract year, a former 2nd-round pick. He has a cap hit of $3.116 million. So he's by no means a cheap acquisition, but still was able to trade for him, and he has 1 year left on his deal. 6'4", 267, 27 years old, had 5.5 sacks last year. And quite frankly, he's been billed as this pass rush specialist. 21.5 sacks over the last 3 seasons. And also, when asked about it, Matt Eberflus was saying that at the defensive end position, with the addition of Darrell Taylor, that they're going to ride the hot hand wherever somebody's going to be at. But also, I think it's key that Darrell Taylor will most likely be kind of that backup for a Montez Sweat at that position, which we'll talk a little bit more about it tonight when we break through the 53-man prediction. But this goes into, okay, we added this defensive end. So who is he going to replace? Is he replacing Dominic Robinson or Jacob Martin? Because yet again, Jacob Martin looked good at the beginning of preseason. He looked good at training camp. But then we never saw him in the preseason game. He was banged up. And the addition of Darrell Taylor, does that mean that they want to try and find that replacement as the backup of Montez Sweat? And maybe they're not ready to move on from Dom Robb yet. This is all stuff that we'll learn closer and we'll talk about a little bit more tonight. But also a little bit more about Darrell Taylor. 27 total pressures last season, but his PFF grade, yet again, just the PFF grade, 50.9 last season, which was good for 103rd at the defensive end position. And his pass rush win rates, not great from someone billed as a pass rushing specialist at 6.2% last season, 8.8% in 2022, and 8.6% in 2021. So my question with Darrell Taylor, besides whose spot is he going to take? That's something we'll talk about tonight. But my question is, can he actually be a multi-year player? Or what does he need to do to make this not just a one and done type of a deal with Darrell Taylor? And I think him proving that kind of pass rush upside and being a good complement to a Montez Sweat, I think is what they want to see out of him. I see him as kind of a, I'm not going to say an upgrade over Yannick Ngakoue, but this is kind of the whole Yannick Ngakoue addition, because they've been in talks. Like, as we know, they've been in talk with Yannick Ngakoue. So I'm going to trust them with their eye on this, saying, hey, we like Darrell Taylor more for our system, more for our scheme. And again, he's kind of a liability in run defense, but good inside of that pass rush zone. Like we said, averaging a little over 7 sacks a season for a backup, it's pretty good, right? That's pretty solid for being able to acquire someone like that. Now, the question you can ask as well, was he going to get cut anyways, or what was the deal there? But ultimately, Bears end up adding at the defensive end spot with Darrell Taylor. Overall, I don't mind it, right? You're trading away a 6th-round pick that you don't know what that might potentially turn into. I still like having more of the picks, but yet again, any of the 6th and 7th rounders, we know what Ryan Poles can do. Ryan Poles is the king of trading back, just accumulating different draft picks. So anytime that we're trading round, day 3 picks, I'm never really that nervous, which is a good feeling, because it's like, hey, it's just a 6. We just got that, we're going to get that in a couple trade backs, right? So to me, I like it. You knew that they were going to add somebody. I would have ideally liked it to be signed, but you never know what that cap hit would be. So at $3 million, it's expensive for someone that was drafted on that contract, but someone that you're like, if you were to sign a free agent, a veteran free agent, that would probably be a little bit more than that $3 million. Might be around more that $7 million range. So you could see this as kind of shaved off some money for a 6th-round pick. But let's talk about the next player that the Bears added. This is the 3rd Chris Williams that they've had on this team since, a decade ago. But Chris Williams, they add from the Cleveland Browns. He's from Wagner College, defensive tackle, small school. He's going into his 4th season or 3rd season, depending on who you ask, because he's been playing in 2021, 2022, 2023, and now 2024. But in 2023, did not play a snap in the regular season. And a matter of fact, has only played a total of 107 snaps in the regular season, all with the Indianapolis Colts with Matt Eberflus. So Eberflus, very familiar with Chris Williams, 6'3", 302. So not oversized, but a little undersized. He actually played a little bit of defensive end this preseason. And this preseason, quite frankly, he had a really good preseason, and I think that's why the Bears are going after him. So during this preseason, he had 2 sacks, 2 tackles, 2 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and had 3 pressures. Had a PFF grade of 80.1. He's 26 years old, has a cap hit of just under $1 million, and also had a 9.5 pass rush win rate this preseason. Yet again, going against backups, but still someone that we were mentioning. The Bears probably wanted to have someone at that defensive tackle spot. I thought that Cohort was looking a little bit better, but I think ultimately the addition of Chris Williams just really shows, hey, we need that depth at that defensive tackle spot, and they believe that Chris Williams, what he's showing during this preseason, is what they'll probably be getting out of Chris Williams. They ended up trading a 6th-round pick in 2025, but also we received a 2025 7th-round pick. So ultimately, I don't really mind this trade, because you're getting someone that you have identified that you want to get in Chris Williams, and you're making sure that you get that player. And coming from a small school, you never know how many years it's going to take for them to ultimately develop. So Chris Williams, there's not much to say about this. Just them adding depth to that defensive tackle spot. they like that. And now the big question is he starting to put it together? Is what you saw in the preseason going to be him moving forward? Now, I don't think he's going to be getting 80 grades with PFF in the future in the regular season, but like we know, it's nice to then have that additional depth at that defensive line spot. Bears ultimately go out and get those players. But one other thing that I want to just bring up about Darrell Taylor, as you all know, I'm big into the draft, big into the NFL draft. A little nugget about Darrell Taylor. A lot of people were thinking he was going to be a first-round pick. I wasn't as high as other people on Darrell Taylor just because he had a very limited pass rush skill set. It was more of the athletic profile and that pass rush profile. So yet again, Bears like those better athletes than anything else, and Darrell Taylor really does kind of fit that mold, and they want to train and teach them different pass rush moves and different skill sets. So maybe that's why they see a little bit more potential out of Darrell Taylor. Also, it'd be interesting to hear too from Shane Waldron what his thoughts on Darrell Taylor are as well. But now let's go to probably what a lot of people have been waiting for, just the players that were cut. And ultimately, not too many players were cut. Like we said, Douglas Coleman out, technically got cut because injury designation from being waived. But then there was 4 other players that they did in fact cut. One of which, Tommy Sweeney, the tight end, which you kind of expected a little bit. I didn't expect it to be this early on, but Tommy Sweeney, someone being moved on from. So that brings up the question of, is Brendan Bates going to be in as a potential practice squad tight end, which we'll talk more tonight. But then also too with Stephen Carlson. We knew that the 4th tight end spot was going to be a little bit of a battle. One key player, Tommy Sweeney, already out of the running. But then, speaking of the competition, at defensive tackle, Keith Randolph Jr., someone that we were bringing up. And it's sad to see him go. He was the undrafted rookie free agent out of Illinois. But ultimately, like we said when we were watching him, just did not see a lot of good stuff out of him. But Keith Randolph, just more of that tweener, and ultimately was not able to keep up with the NFL size. So ultimately you see him getting his walking papers. But also, last little bit, Freddie Swain, the wide receiver, he's gone. And then last but not least, Khalid Kareem, someone that I really liked, someone that was, I thought that he played even better than Daniel Hardy. I know that might seem like a bold take, but I really liked what I saw out of Kareem. He was also going against the lessers compared to what Hardy was going against, even though that they were usually out there at the same time. Hardy was usually out there a little bit earlier. Kareem, though, I was kind of shocked that they released him this early. Maybe, knowing polls, maybe they're trying to do that so people know that he's available, that they might want to try and pick him up and then add him on their team. Maybe the Bears were just trying to do something like that. But Khalid Kareem ultimately not with the Bears anymore. Sad to see it because I liked him. Not saying that he would be a starter or an absolute contributor, but when you're talking about the 3rd and 4th stringers, you got to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. So it's nice to see the Bears moving on from a couple, but then adding in some extra talent to just make the overall roster a little bit better. So if you haven't already, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, go out to whatever podcast app that you're on and try and rate the show 5 stars. It helps us out tremendously. And with that, tonight we'll be breaking down the 53-man prediction. We have a whole bunch of different shows to keep you covered on the Chicago Bears. And with that, Unbearable Sports Podcast, we are out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a bad chick.